and hi, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, welcome back to my channel. If you're not new here, in this video I will be doing a sit down talking with me style video where I will just be having a chit chat. I'll be using my desktop camera with my microphone with a wire, and I will be getting into what is a relationship, what do I define it as a relationship, and what do I interpret a relationship is to me. And yeah, so then let's begin. So yeah, from studying English, science and maths and learning about the world around me, I do think that relationships can mean different things for different people. For example, for some people, their biggest relationship is with an object. Maybe they build something that is something that they are interested in. Their relationship with that object is quite strong, for example. For some people, relationships are a not a one person thing, but maybe a relationship with a certain type of people, a group, a genre, what you feel about a group of people, and how you interpret that experience of being around a certain particular stereotype, for example, and if that stereotype doesn't ring as a stereotype for you, and actually that group of people, you are able to seek comfort from them and support, for example. And then there's the whole romantic relationship, for example. For some people, they might have a pet, for example, and their relationship with their pet they might have a really strong bond with their pet and a strong relationship with their pet, and that might occupy a lot of the time of their day and their life and all of these things. So I thought I'd just get into different interpretations of what a relationship could mean, because it depends on also it can also depend on what you want to do with your life, for example, because let's say you are a performer or you like to be on the stage, for example, your relationship with the audience or crowd might grow as you get used to performing, and you might start to develop a strong relationship with your audience. And even if you don't know them personally, you might be able to communicate to them what you're feeling better as you go on and further that relationship. So sometimes relationships can be like a unsolved puzzle, maybe, or a situation for growth, and not necessarily a specific one-way relationship. Maybe it is one way, maybe it is two ways, the energy, and maybe that's the case. And sometimes some people have a relationship with a lot of people, but not in a romantic way. They might see it as, I belong with this certain type of people. These people are the kind of people that I identify with, in a sense, with your personality, or not your personality, but maybe your ego. You feel like you can be yourself in certain scenarios with them, so you trust them with certain things, like maybe you trust them with your thoughts and your feelings, so you know that you can count on them when there's nobody else there, for example. Some of the relationships that I see as a typical relationship would be a relationship that is romantic. And why is that? Because of the fact that some people have a strong relationship with the earth, or with plants, or with Mother Nature, for example. Or some people have a strong relationship with animals, and that's not necessarily a pet. Maybe that they have a relationship with animals that are public, to the general public. And yeah, so yeah, those are the different kinds of relationships. Some people have friendships, which are relationships that might be pertain to one or two people, but that might be a non-romantic relationship. It's just a friendship where you share your experiences with, your thoughts, your feelings with as well, and what you think about things, your opinions, for example. And yeah, so some people have a relationship with books, for example, as an object, with the words on the page. They have a relationship with that. And so a relationship can mean different things if you go into it. But from what I would define as a relationship, majority of the time, is like a romantic relationship. Between a big part of relationships can be caring for another person, and that might be like for example, a family relative, and caring for them and being around them and looking out for them, having their back, and making sure that they are okay and their well-being is okay and in check, and how those things can accumulate as a relationship as well, and not just a relationship that is not related friendly, or well, not related blood related relatives or family relationship or bonds as well. So it could be family bonds and relationships where you bond together and you can be friends, but also you still kind of remain a family as well, by doing things like what you would kind of normally do for somebody who's in your family or your family that you're related to, for example. When it comes to, like, for example, the main subject I was trying to speak about in this video is dating, but because of my interpretation of what a relationship could be, it kind of changes what dating is for me, if that makes sense. So, like, for example, when I think about the relationships I could have with a family member, or a relationship I could have with an object, then dating's not really included in that equation, for example. But if you are going into, for example, the dating atmosphere, for example, you might notice that the person that you perhaps could be dating might do things that are there to help you make your life easier, for example. Some people perceive romance differently, and I don't think there are that many ways to perceive romance. I don't think there are that many love languages, but when you break them down, what are the love languages when it comes to dating, you can see how that what you let in, from what you're willing to let in from the person that you are dating, for example. Are you willing for them to know personal things about you that maybe only certain number of people know, like your doctor or something like that? Are you willing to share that information with them, or are you wanting to keep it private and not share that with them? For example, some people don't open up, if that makes sense. So what would you share with, your relationship with somebody you're dating? Relationships can mean different things for different people, but when it comes to dating, I'd say if the person that you're dating doesn't know about let's say you're sick one day and they're there to give you medicine, that is an example of what I would describe romantic. So that's just me, and so I've learned that recently. So it doesn't mean I won't accept that help from people who are related to me, my family members or relatives, but it takes me some time to explain, because I don't really like to explain those kinds of things to relatives, because I feel like, I don't know, that's just not something that I would share. But then I've started to share that. When I've started to learn to share that, I started to realize how that is a big part of the person that I'm dating, if I can see that they're actually care. So when you're dating somebody romantically, I would definitely be concerned about what you have in common. For example, if you have some things in common, like, do you like the same kinds of food? Do you like the same kinds of weather? Do you like the same kinds of activities? Do you like the same kinds of style, same kinds of holidays, like visiting certain holidays, places? Do you like doing certain things that are similar, like, I don't know, reading certain specific genre of books? Or do you like to watch specific genre of TV, and do you have that in common with them and the other person that you're dating, for example? And yeah, again, how these can sort of also relate to other relationships again. And yeah, there's also the relationship you have with yourself, which I think is actually one of the most important relationships that you'll probably ever have. talk to yourself? How do you treat, yourself when you've done something that is an achievement, or when you failed? How do you comfort yourself? How do you support yourself in your own ways? What makes you feel better when you're sad? What makes you feel happy? For example, when you want to congratulate yourself for something, sometimes that's a nice thing to do. Yeah, so having a relationship with yourself is also very beneficial for you, because you can focus on what you want and what you can give to yourself, what you need to give to yourself, like places you need to go or things that you need to do, and how you can provide for yourself, getting motivated to do these things. Because there are so many things that can motivate, that there are so many ways that somebody can motivate you, but if you're able to motivate yourself, it is a very good skill to have when you are trying to build your relationship with yourself. And yeah, so for example, sometimes I like to be alone, outside, for example, and being by myself, strengthening my confidence and being by myself, doing things on my own, whether that's studying, whether that's taking some time to read something and going on my own for a walk, for example, doing things by myself to feel confident, to feel like I'm not lacking in making myself feel like, confident with myself and all these types of things, for example. Yeah, and about when it comes to what does a relationship mean to me, and what do I define and what do I interpret as a relationship, I'd say a relationship is also something that represents your values. For example, how do you, if you have a good relationship with yourself, how do you are you a talkative person? Do you talk about it or do you not talk about it? I find that relationships shouldn't be something that, believe it or not, that you talk about, if that makes sense. That a relationship's real proof is silence, when it's silent, and how the relationship is when you don't have anything to talk about, when there's nothing to speak about, when there's nothing to do. What do you think of the person? What do you feel about the person? What do they feel about you? Do you feel like, it's almost like when you're in a library or something and you're able to sit next to somebody who doesn't make any noise, and then let's say you're next to somebody who makes lots of noise, then what I would normally do in that situation is like try and find a place where there's no noise, for example. And how those kinds of things, where they might be able to know already, say you are in the library and the person I sit next to is making noise, you can't control whether they're making noise or not, but you can always get up and find another place to sit, for example. But let's say the person is not making any noise and they are able to sit down and be quiet, because they can tell that you're not making a noise, because you're not making a noise that you might not want somebody else to make a noise you might want without having to say it, for example. So being able to be there and not match your energy, in a sense, not your energy, but match what you're doing. I'm sitting here quietly and then they start sitting there quietly, and then you can see that you can work in that place without the person making noise, but the person also showing you that they're not gonna disturb you, if that makes sense. So that kind of, I feel like that's what I would describe as that's what you might see and value in a relationship, for example. Like, it's not something you see, but it's something you feel like, do they value those kinds of things, those similar things, like being quiet, for example, or not making a scene or embarrassing you publicly, and not through the internet, but like actually in person, for example, where you are in a situation where there's like other people there. Are they gonna try and make fun of you or embarrass you purposely, and not think about what you might feel about that? Do you like to be embarrassed, for example? Those kinds of things. And how somebody who knows that you might not like it, if they know that you don't like it, then they wouldn't embarrass you, for example. And yeah, so that's kind of an example of what I would describe as, when you know what you value and what that person values, how can you know that maybe it's, you know, a relationship where it's working out is maybe because they don't have to speak about what you value, and what you value just naturally kind of clicks. Those kinds of things, for example, you don't really necessarily need to shout it out across the room and tell them everything in detail. I find that that's a big part of what I would interpret as a relationship, for example, especially a romantic one. I don't necessarily would interpret that for a friendship, because I would say that a friendship, so that's why I think I have issues with what does a relationship really mean, because of the fact that a friendship I might define it differently, so it's kind of difficult for me to sometimes garner what it really means to have a friendship, because a friendship, I find what I interpret that as is different. I would expect more from a friend, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't expect them to make noise, for example, but I would expect them maybe to go out the way to ask, do you mind if I make noise? And maybe the fact that they're willing to ask is more interesting to me, because I will know that, because I find that, well, with friendships, I'm more off guard, if that makes sense. So I'm not really paying attention to those things. But if they're willing to bring attention to the things that I value in those types of moments where I wouldn't want to be embarrassed, and they're able to actually articulate, do you mind if all these kinds of questions, I find it captures my attention, so that I know whether they are on the same page, because sometimes I cannot tell because I cannot read somebody else's mind, for example. I don't want to have to read my friend's mind, but I would like to be able to read somebody's mind if it's a romantic relationship, for example, if that makes sense. So I would try my best to try and interpret the situation and try and see how I can, make do what is going on. But with a friendship, I might expect some more weight to be pulled from their side, and perhaps help me in that way. Like, not help me by doing things for me, but being able to get my attention in a way that's friendly, if that makes sense, and in a way that I actually want to speak to you again. Otherwise, I wouldn't really speak to you again after, if I feel like, you've been hostile, for example, or you've been getting frustrated with the fact that I'm that way. So then if you're frustrated with that, then you don't have to be around me. So that's kind of how I see that's how I kind of see friendships, based on my experiences in life, going to, like, for example, education. That's kind of how I've had it, because I've kind of used, when it comes to friendships, when it comes to the senses, I usually like to use my eyes most, because I like to see their reaction, or I would like to see what, are they doing? Shall I, are they available at that moment? Are they occupied? Those kinds of things. Whereas when it comes to a romantic relationship, I would use other senses, for example, and try and think out of the box a bit more. So maybe I might do things that are a bit different, so then you could tell that it's more of a romantic relationship than a friendship. But I don't think anyone can really tell any of these things. But I find that when I mean tell, I mean, let's say you've never seen this person before, and this is the first time you've ever seen them. How can you tell what they're doing is a invite or rejection? How can you tell what they're doing is comfort, whether they're feeling safe, or whether they're feeling unsafe and they're starting to panic and feel scared, for example? And how those things come from not knowing the person, and just knowing yourself and knowing the world around you, and learning about how different behaviors, I guess, how that might look like for you in that position, in that situation, and that scenario. And you would sit there and you sort of think to yourself, well, this person's having a panic attack. Some people might not stay because it might trigger them. So, for example, you might not know this person is a stranger, or a person that you don't know in stranger, in a sense. What would I define as a stranger? Because I think a stranger is also another relationship, for example, because of the idea of what is a stranger, because let's say you grew up with the idea of a stranger, danger, and like this person's part, you don't know, they're not part of your family, or you don't directly know them through mutual friends or something, and it's a stranger in a sense you've never seen them before, never spoken to them before, and you're quickly able to tell what's going on, or you're quickly able to know what they might be needing from you in that moment. Maybe they're asking you for help, maybe they're asking you for something, maybe they need your help or something, and so they might approach you. And then with that relationship, the stranger relationship, it's sort of the relationship that you would have with somebody in a situation that you never experienced before. So that's why I was kind of just defining a stranger. It's not really a stranger if you've experienced it before, because then you might have experienced helping them. Let's say you do help them, or you say, no, I can't help you right now because I'm busy. Let's say you do help them, you can actually end up getting to know them more than you do your own friends, because of what they might be asking for help might kind of make a bond, for example, and how that bond might actually end up becoming a thing where they're like in your mind a stranger but also like a friend. So it's like you kind of forget that they're a stranger, so that it becomes a friendship kind of thing. So that can kind of happen. That's something I find that is also the last on what I would define as a relationship, is relationships with strangers. Like, let's say you go on holiday, somebody you don't know, you never seen them before, they don't know you, they don't know your situation as well. Let's say they've seen you walking around, but they don't know you. What, for example, they just seen you because you're on holiday, for example, and they're being really helpful, helping you find directions, and how that can kind of make you feel a bit more safe, for example. But then by the end, let's say you're going back home, you're going to feel like you're never going to see them again. You might miss them, for example, because they helped you. That kind of thing in your head, what is a stranger? That's kind of all I wanted to talk about. It's not really a specific tips or what I think about dating or what I think about relationships. It's just kind of what I interpret as certain relationships. What are certain relationships? What do they mean to me? And what are the different relationships that I kind of classify them as? There could be different relationships. And yeah, so that's kind of all I have for today. But I hope if you found it interesting, please feel free to give it a like. And if not, I'll keep scrolling or exit the video now, because the video has ended anyway. And if you feel like you like this video and not my other videos, please feel free to subscribe. And yeah, so that's it. That's the end of the video. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.